In this video, I'm going to talk about adding and subtracting rational expressions. Before we go to work on some problems, let's recall how we added and subtracted rational numbers, or just say fractions. Now, what is the condition to add fractions? The condition is that we need exactly the same denominator on our fractions, and in this example we have it. So the common denominator is 3. When I have the common denominator, we are going and work on the numerator. So on the numerator I have 2 plus 1, which is 3 over 3, and this is just the number 1. So what I did here, I performed the operation and I simplified. So two things. Let's go to example 2. So the denominators are 6 and 2, but we have the common denominator, which is one of the denominators. 2 becomes 6 if we multiply 2 by 3. So the common denominator is 6. The first denominator didn't change. The first numerator is not changing. The second denominator needs to be manipulated, multiplying by 3 up and down. So since the second denominator is changed, the first denominator also is changed. So we have 3. And now that we have the same denominator, we work on the numerators. And this is 2 over 6. And I see that I can simplify 2 and 6 by dividing both of them by 2, and the final answer is in the simplest form, 1/3. So still here we have two jobs: to perform the operation, which is subtracting, and simplifying what we get, the result. Now, the third example, I need the same denominators, and I need the smallest number that is divisible by 5 and 7, or we say the smallest common multiple of 5 and 7. And since 5 and 7 do not have common factors, the only way is to multiply them by each other. Okay, and 5 times 7 is 35. So 35 is the least common denominator that we call LCD. In this case, I have to manipulate both fractions. So 5 multiplying by 7 and 7 by 5. And what is the rule? Up and down. So the first numerator becomes 21 and the second 5. And now that I have the same denominator, 21 minus 5 is 16. And the result is already on the simplest form. I am done. The fourth example, still the rule is, if I want to add those fractions, I need exactly the same denominator, and I ask myself, what is the smallest number that is divisible by both 8 and 6? Or what is the smallest common multiple of 8 and 6? And the answer is 24. Because 8 times 3 is 24, and 6 times 4 is 24, or 24 divided by 8 is 3, 24 divided by 6 is 4. So let me go now and multiply the first fraction by 3 and the second by 4. The first numerator is 1 times 3, 3. The second numerator is 4. Now, the common denominator is 24, and 3 plus 4 is 7. So, already in the simplest form, done. Let's now go and work on some problems where now the fractions are not anymore just number, but they contain polynomials. because we are talking about rational expressions. Let's go and work on the first example. Example 1. So 3x over 4y squared plus 7x over 6y. And since it is addition of two fractions, I have to think about LCD. So what is LCD in this case? As we know, polynomials contains terms, and each term contains numbers and variables. For numbers, for the coefficient of the terms, it is easy because we know how to find the common factor, LCD, of numbers. So 4 and 6, the LCD, the least common denominator, is 12. You can think 24 and so on, but the smallest is 12. Why? Because 12 is divisible by both 4 and 6, or we can say that 4 and 6 becomes 12 if we multiply 4 by 3 and 6 by 2. While for the variable is very easy. If the denominator contains the same variable, the highest exponent is the common factor, the common denominator. So LCD is 12y squared. 12 is the common denominator for 4 and 6 for the coefficient, and y squared for the variable. Now, I am going to manipulate both fractions. So, I have to manipulate now, which means multiply up and down by what is missing from the denominator from LCD. As we see, y squared, what is missing? Just is missing a factor 3. 4 times 3 becomes 12. So the first fraction will be multiplied by 3, up and down. And now the second fraction. So what is missing from the second denominator? It is missing the factor 2. 6 needs to be multiplied by 2 to become 12, and y by itself to become y squared. So the second fraction will be multiplied by 2y up and down. And now, let me write now the common denominator. And let's write what we get on the numerator. So on the first numerator we get 9x. 3 times 3, 9x. And on the second denominator we get 7 times 2, 14xy. So I perform the addition, and now I will check if I can simplify the result. So I see on the numerator that we have a common factor here, which is x, but y2 factor, I do not have an x on the denominator in order to simplify. So these two terms are not like terms in order to combine, because on the first term is missing a y. So I'm done. Let me repeat again. When we work adding and subtracting fractions, we perform the operation and we check if we can simplify the result. Example 2. Two x plus 1 over x minus 4x over x plus 3. The first thing, since it is a subtraction of fractions, I have to think about LCD. What is LCD? So when I look at the denominators, I see that they do not have a common factor. So if they do not have a common factor, the only way is to multiply denominators by each other. So the least common denominator is x times the other denominator, x plus 3. And now I'm going to manipulate both fractions if their denominators miss something from the common denominator. Now, let me start with the first fraction. 2x plus 1 over x. So from the first denominator is missing x plus 3. So I have to multiply by x plus 3. And be careful, when you go and multiply the numerator by x plus 3 and the numerator contains more than one term, please, you have to use parentheses in order to use the distribution law. Okay, because what is the mistake? If you don't put the parentheses. Okay, so this will go and multiply only the second term and you are missing the first one. So again, if the numerator contains, or the denominator contains more than one term, use parentheses before you go and manipulate the fraction. So minus, I have 4x over x plus 3. What is missing from the second denominator from LCD is missing just x. So the second fraction will be multiplied up and down by x. And still, do you see? If I do not use the parentheses, so this x will go and multiply only 3. So be careful, since the denominator contains more than one term, you have to use parentheses. And now, let me write the common factor. The common denominator, sorry. And let's see what I have on the numerators. So let's use the distribution property here. 2x times x is 2x squared. 2x times 3 is 3x. 6 is 6x, sorry. 1 times x is x. And 1 times 3 is 3. And from the second, I have negative 4x squared. Okay, so now I have to combine like terms. So I have x squared here, x and x is together. So So 2x squared and negative 4x squared is negative 2x squared. Okay, so positive 2 and negative 4 is subtraction. Subtract from 4 and keep the sign of 4. 4 minus 2 is 2 and keep the negative sign. And for x's we have 7x's. And we have positive 3. Now, can I factor this? So, when this is the result now that comes from subtraction, and let's check if we can simplify. But as we see on the top, we have a trinomial, and the product of the numbers, if we can factor this, is negative 2 times 3, which is negative 7, and negative 7 means different sign, but we cannot find two numbers that multiply and give their product is negative 7 and their sum is positive 7. So we are done. We cannot factor this in order to get a common factor with the denominator. So done. Example 3. Two x minus 1 over x minus 7 plus x over x plus 4. Addition of fractions, we need the least common denominator, and looking at the denominators, we see they do not have a common factor. Let me write this. So what is the possibility? To multiply both denominators by each other. So x minus 7, x plus 4 times x plus 4 is the least common denominator. And now I am going to manipulate both fractions, which means I have to multiply up and down by what is missing their denominators from LCD. So let me go now to manipulate the first fraction. So as we said, since we have a binomial, two terms, use parentheses before you go and multiply up and down by what you need. So what is missing from the LCD is missing x plus 4. So the first fraction will be multiplied up and down by x plus 4. And now the second fraction, which is x over x plus 4, will be multiplied. What is missing from the LCD is missing x minus 7. Be careful to use parentheses on the denominator as we mentioned before. And now let's write the common denominator, x minus 7, x plus 4. And what we get on the first numerator, using the distribution property, we have to multiply 2x times x is 2x squared, 2x times 4 is 8x, negative 1 times x is negative x, and negative 1 times 4, negative 4. And now, let me extend this. What I get from the second numerator, x times x is x squared, and x times negative 7, negative 7x. So this is the result from addition, and now let's see if we can simplify. So I have x squared. Let me go and combine them. 2x squared plus x squared is 3x squared. 8x minus x is 7x. Minus 7x is negative 14x. Now let me continue here. So I have negative 14x, and I have negative 4. Now working faster, maybe you can do a mistake. So let's go a little bit slowly. So let me write like terms next to each other. So I have x squared, 2x squared here, plus x squared. That means that I have to combine those two. I have now 8x minus x, which is 7x. This is easy. Plus 7x minus 7x. You see that this is 0. So x disappears because these are opposite terms. So when working faster, you can make a mistake. Okay? And what else? We have minus 4 here. So the final answer is 3x squared minus 4 over x minus 7 times x plus 4. So may I simplify this further? No, because when looking at the numerator and the denominator, if I factor this, okay, if I factor this to find a common factor with the denominator, I will continue and say I am going to simplify, but in this case I am done. There is nothing to simplify. Example 4. Three over x minus 5 minus 18 over x squared minus 2x minus 15. So the first thing that we are going to do is to look for LCD. What is LCD? But in this case, I'm looking at the denominators, and I will factor this trinomial, and in order to find a common factor. Maybe they have, maybe they do not have. But when I'm looking here, I see the yes, because negative 15 is negative 5 times 3. So I have it. So 3x minus 5 minus 18 over, this is factorable, As we said, negative 15 means different signs. This is the product of two numbers that have different signs. The largest is negative, which is negative 5 and positive 3. So now I have to think for LCD. And as I see, the denominators have a common factor. X minus 5. So the common factor is a part of LCD. And what else? Any other factor which is present at our denominator. So x plus 3. Here we do not have, we just have number 1, but here we have x plus 3. So again, the least common denominator is a common factor of the denominators and any other factor that appears on our denominators. So in this case, our LCD is x minus 5 times x plus 3. Now that we have LCD in our hands, we are going to manipulate the fractions and multiplying them up and down by what is missing in their denominators from LCD. Let's start with the first fraction. We have 3x minus 5, and now that I'm manipulating, and the denominator contains two terms, I have to use parentheses. What is missing? It is missing from LCD, it is missing x plus 3. That means that I have to go and multiply up and down by x plus 3. And on the second, I do not miss nothing, so I have to rewrite the second fraction. Now that I have exactly the same denominator, let me write the common denominator here. And what I have on the first numerator, I have 3x. 3 times 3, 9, minus 18. Now this is the result from subtraction, and let me go and simplify. Yes, I have to combine here positive 9 and negative 18. This is subtraction. Subtract from 18, keep the sign of 18. So I have 3x minus 18 minus 9, 9. X minus 5, x plus 3. So I am done. Why? Because I cannot simplify further. Why? Because if, do you see this minus here? So if this was a plus, I could factor 3 and I will be left with x plus 3. So if I factor the numerator, and the factorization produce a common factor with the denominator, yes, I will continue, okay? But in this case, I have a minus here, which is different from this plus. Let me explain to you. For this, I am done. Suppose that my result was 3x plus 9. And on the denominator, I have x minus 5. And I have x plus 3. Looking at this result, I can continue and simplify. Why? Because if I factor the numerator, then the factorization will produce a common factor with the denominator. So let me go and do it. Factor 3. I will get x plus 3. And now this factorization give me a common factor with the denominator, and the answer will be 3x minus 5. But in this case, our was minus. So we are done here. Example 5. We have 2 x minus 2 minus 7 x squared plus 3x minus 10. The first thing we have to think about LCD, but to find LCD we can check if this trinomial is factorable. So we have a negative product, which is positive, positive 5 times negative 2, and positive, let me show you, positive 5 times negative 2 is negative 10, and positive 5 and negative 2 is positive 3. So a negative 2, yes. If this is not factorable, so what was the possibility? Just to multiply the denominator by each other. But in this case, we can factor, we find the common factor. Let me show you during the work. So the second denominator is x plus 5 times x minus 2. So let me use the parentheses here. I have a common factor, which is the binomial x minus 2. And I'm ready now to write down LCD. So LCD is the common factor, the binomial x minus 2, times the other factor that comes from the second denominator. So let me write the common factor here. Okay, so the first fraction is 2x minus 2. Now let me manipulate. Let me multiply. Up and down by what? What is missing from the first denominator from LCD? It is missing x plus 5. Let me write this. This came from common. It was a common factor. So I have to multiply the first fraction by x plus 5. And the second fraction is the LCD. The denominator is the LCD, so I have to rewrite. Okay, so now that I have exactly the same denominator, okay, they are exactly the same, only the order differs, but the order in multiplication is nothing. So what I get from the first numerator, 2x, 2 times 5, 10, minus 7. So let me combine 10 and 7. 10 minus 7 is 3, positive 3, and I'm done. Clearly, I see here that I cannot go and simplify further. So let's go to do example 6. And the example 6 is x squared plus 2 over x times x plus 1 minus x minus 1 over x squared. So what is LCD? This is the question. Okay? So on the first denominator, I have x times x plus 1, so 2 factors. On the second denominator, I have just x squared. So x is present at both denominators, and we know the part of the LCD is the variable with the highest exponent. So is x squared. And now, after we and x plus 1 that comes from the first fraction. This is LCD. So let me go and manipulate both fractions by multiplying up and down, but what is missing from the denominators, two denominators from LCD. So let me go here. So I have x squared plus 2 x plus 1. So what is missing here is missing just x, because x needs to be multiplied with itself to get x squared. So the first fraction will be multiplied by x up and down, and the second by x plus 1. Okay, missing x plus 1 because x squared is already there. And now that I have the LCD, let me write it down. You don't need to go and to perform here. And let's see what the numerators will give us. X times x squared is x to the third. X times 2 is 2x. And now recognize if you have two binomials that multiply each other and they are exactly the same but they differ just one is with minus and the other is plus, so this is what? This is a difference of the square, which is x squared minus 1. If you don't remember, okay, just remember from factorization. So x squared minus 1 can be factored as two binomials, with one with minus, the other with plus, because this is a difference of the squares. Let me write this like that. Okay? If you don't recognize, you go and use the distribution property. And you will get exactly x squared minus 1. So, let me write it down. A difference of two squares. And now let me write the common denominator. So I have x to the third plus 2x minus x squared minus and minus, so if you multiply, this is positive 1. So let me go. I have x to the third. So really we are done here, but if you want, you can just write like that, but as you don't need. So done. Why I'm done here? Because I cannot factor the numerator in order to get a common factor with the denominators, so I'm leaving. So stop here and done. Example 7. Three over x squared minus 3x plus 4 over x squared plus x minus 12. So let's think about LCD. Let's check. So this is a trinomial, factorable, because we have a negative product, which is positive 4 times negative 3. Okay? And here we have x minus 3 because we factor out x. So clearly you can see only by taking a look at the denominators that they have a common factor, and this is very helpful. Now, let me go to see this clearly. The first step is to factor each denominator. So what I have on the first denominator? I have a common factor, which is x open parenthesis, here is left x, and here a negative 3, plus. I check this is factorable. A negative product means the different signs, the largest will be positive 4 and the smallest negative 3. Okay, so clearly now I can see what is LCD. LCD is the common factor of both denominator. Be careful to write it just once. What else? Each factor that appears in both denominators, x from the first and x plus 4 from the second. So this is our LCD, where x minus 3 was a common factor. And now let's go and multiply both fractions by what their denominators are missing from LCD. So I have 3 x minus 3. What is missing? X plus 4. So the first fraction will be multiplied up and down by x plus 4. And the second fraction, what is missing? Is missing only x. So is missing only x, will be multiplied by x up and down. Okay. Now that I have the common denominator, let me rewrite this in order. So let me write x first, x minus 3. In multiplication, the order doesn't matter at all, but we like to write like this. Okay. Now, what we have from the first numerator, we have 3x plus 12 plus 4x. And as we see, we have x's to combine, so 3x plus 4x is 7x, plus 12, which is the final answer, over x minus 3, times x plus 4. Nothing to be simplified, so I am done. And the last example is example 8. We have 7x to the third minus 4x squared plus 2x over x minus 3 plus 6x to the third plus 5x squared minus 7 over 3 minus x. Now, as we said before, the first thing is to look at the denominators and to check, to think if they have a common factor or not. So let's see both denominators. We have a positive x and a negative 3. And the second denominator, we have a positive 3 and a negative x. So looking at the denominators, we see that they have opposite terms. What does it mean? That if the denominators are exactly, okay, they have what you see x3, x3. But their signs are different. That means they are opposite terms, they have opposite terms, and easily by multiplying one of them by negative 1, we can make them exactly the same. In other words, if I multiply the second denominator by negative 1, I am changing their signs, and the second denominator will be the first denominator. So negative 1 times negative x is positive x, and negative 1 times 3 is negative 3. But I am not allowed to do this only on the denominator, so I have to multiply the numerator also. And multiplying by negative 1 means just changing the signs. So, let me rewrite this again. 7x to the third minus 4x squared plus 2x over x minus 3 Now, let me write plus here. So this will be negative x to the third, negative 5x squared, positive 7, over, let me write x first in order to have the same order. Negative 1 will give me a positive x, and this will give me negative 3. And now clearly we see that they have exactly the same denominator. So we just multiply by negative 1 up and down, or we just change the signs of the terms of the numerator and the denominator, both of them. And now let me write here that LCD is already there, is our denominators. So this means we can go and directly work on the numerators. So I have 7x to the third. Let me write like terms next to each other. 7 here, negative here. So, okay. And I have square here, negative 4x squared and negative 5x squared. So I'm writing like terms next to each other, and I have 2x here and 7 here. So in other words, I have to combine these like terms, and this is easy. 7 minus 6 is 1x to the third. Negative 4 and negative 5, this is addition of two negative numbers. Keep the common sign and add. 4 plus 5 is 9x squared plus 2x plus 7 over x minus 3, and I am done. Why I'm done? Because I cannot factor the numerator in order to find a factor which is x minus 3 in order to simplify. So thank you very much. This was the video for today. See you in the next video when I will talk about simplifying more complex rational expression. Thank you.